Welcome to the Unfiltered Breakdown series, where I take an edit or animation and remake it from scratch. This is going to be a super beginner friendly tutorial. And also, I'm not just going to tell you to do this or do that or copy my settings kind of way. Instead, I'll explain things in a way that's straightforward without being too pushy or over explaining. Hope that makes sense. Here's what we are going to recreate. This is where we are going to start with. And before we get into anything, I got a few words about these clips. If I play it, you can see that there is some time remapping going on. Let me just show you. About this clip, this is not the actual footage. I mean a reversal from the middle. That's why you are seeing these keyframes on the time remap. And if you are wondering how I did it, well, let's just do it again. Go to time and enable time remapping, or use the shortcut Ctrl-Alt-T, which gives us these two keyframes. Drag the last keyframe to the middle, and to reverse it, all you have to do is just copy the first keyframe and put it at the end. Now it's reversed, but there is a missing frame right at this keyframe. Let's undo everything, and if I go to the last keyframe, you can see that there is no frame here. And to fix it, go to the frame right before and create a keyframe. And then delete this frameless keyframe. Now do the same process we just did earlier. Copy the first keyframe to the end. Now there is no missing frames. Now let's make it faster at the start and end. So ease the keyframes and jump into the graph editor. I'm at the value graph. So the thing about the value graph is that the steeper the curve vertically, the faster the motion. So right now if I make it straighter vertically straighter, the faster the motion will be here. Yeah, you can see that. Do the same at the end. Let's play it back and see. Okay, it's a bit too much fast. There. I think that's better. That's all there it is to the footages. Now let's start with creating a basic scale transition. So we need a null object. You can also use shortcut Ctrl-Alt-Shift-Y. Let's put it right above the first footage and trim it to the footage length. We would need two null objects because there will be two scale movements. First scaling out at the beginning and then the scaling in to the second footage as a transition. So duplicate this null object. And also we would need two null objects for this footage as well. So let's just duplicate it and put it right above the second footage. Let's match the length of the footage. Okay, don't forget to parent it. I'm going to trim the work area because we are only going to work on this footage first. And also I don't have to see this second footage end followed by the nulls. Let's hide it. Select the first null object. Then open the scale property and create a keyframe. Let's just drag this near end of the footage. Honestly, we don't have to worry about the placement of this keyframe. Now let's increase the scale. And there isn't any specific value that you should follow. Anything above 200 would be fine because it has to look like it's scaling out. Okay, I think that's okay. Let's see. Jump into the graph editor. Again, value graph. We want the faster motion at the beginning, so let's create a straight, vertically straight curve at the beginning. Let's preview it. I think that's fine. Now for the second movement, which is scaling in. Also, there isn't any specific position of this keyframe. We can just experiment it in the future, so let's just leave it here. Now scale in. Let's see keyframes. At the end is where I need the most faster motion. Let's preview it. Yeah, it can be made better. It can look better. Yeah, it's all up to the experimenting part. You just have to play back and see what works. There, I think that's fine. Now for the second footage, let's unhide it. And this time we don't have to see the first footage and followed by the nulls. Let's hide it. And also I'm going to move the work area to the second footage and match the footage length. Let's select the first null object and create a keyframe on the scale property. This time we need a scale in movement. So for that I have to decrease the scale. Okay, that's enough. Let's easy is move the keyframe a bit further. So open the graph editor and ease in at the start. Let's see if it's matching up. Okay, that's not too bad. We are getting there. Okay. And yeah, you are probably noticing the black background. To fill those gaps, apply the effect Unfiltered motion die. Well, in a nutshell, this effect duplicates the layer we applied it to. One of the common mistakes people make is that they crank up the values way more than they actually need. And if I scale down, you can see that there is a ton of duplicates. And since After Effects is going to process all of them, it's not just making the software work harder, which leads to a slower workflow, and it also makes the render time a lot longer. So just use what you actually need. Let's go to the first keyframe and see how much we actually need. I'm holding the key control to increase the values incrementally, otherwise it will just increase a lot. Same for the height. And also let's check the mirror edges box to get rid of the sharp edges. Now for the scaling out, select this second null object and create a keyframe on the scale property. Let's go to the end of the footage and decrease the value. Okay, that's fine. See the keyframes and ease in at the end of the footage. Let's preview it. Okay, not too bad. Let's see it all together. Okay. Now I would like some motion blur. Let's select both footages and turn on the motion blur. And also make sure you turn on the composition motion blur. Let's play it back and see. Okay, I'm noticing a frame here that isn't affected. That isn't have any motion blur. Yeah, this frame. That's because it's right after the keyframe. All you have to do is just move the keyframe. Now let's play it again. Also, yeah, at the second footage there is also that same problem. All you have to do is just move the keyframe. Let's save it in case After Effects crashes. Now for the distortion shake, create adjustment layer. Let's put it right above the first footage and also let's trim it to the footage length. Same for the second footage. Match the length of the footage. And we don't have to see the null objects. Let's hide it. Now we are going to start by applying the warp effect and change the warp style to skews. Well, it literally skews the layer. For a more accurate demonstration, I'm going to draw a shape layer. I'm going to center it so that we can see properly. I'm going to put it right beneath the adjustment layer, and we don't have to see the first footage for now because I'm going to show you how this distortion is happening. Yeah, it literally skews the layer and unskews it or stretches it. Yeah, let's delete this shape layer and turn back on the visibility of the first footage. And yes, one thing I'm noticing is the black background, and we need to apply the motion tile effect to the adjustment layer, not the footage. So apply the motion tile effect, and you need to put above the warp effect. Also, don't forget to check the mirror edges box to get rid of those sharp edges. Now we are going to animate it, this bend property, and I'm going to animate it in an elastic way. What I mean by that, look at this rubber-like movement. See how the animation ends. At first it pushes to the extreme and swings back in the opposite direction, but with less force each time. It keeps repeating this back and forth motion, gradually losing energy until it finally settles at the starting position. I have added these values to show how we are going to animate it. It moves to the positive side, then to the negative, and each time the movement gets smaller and smaller until it eventually comes to rest at 0. This is how it's going to look. First I will put an extreme value like 60. Let's create a keyframe, press U to reveal the keyframe and go forward a couple of frames, and I'm going to put a negative value, but not the exact 60 but shy 60 or closer to that value. 5. Yeah, there is no perfect values, and again I'm going to move forward a couple of frames, and this time I'm going for a positive side. Repeat the same process. Finally, let's zero it. Let's trim in the work area. Apply it. Okay, a lot of tweaks is necessary here. And also you can stretch the keyframes by holding Alt and just dragging or making it closer. Okay, not too bad. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect, but we are getting there. One thing you are probably noticing that it's kind of tedious process doing all of this manual keyframing, and if you are lucky we'll get a decent shake, but there is a better alternative, which is expressions. Before we get into the expression part, I'm going to delete all of this keyframe, and I'm going to put the value to 30 and create a keyframe. And after about 10 frames, I'm going to zero it. And the expression I mentioned is from a plugin called Motion Tools. And don't worry, it's a completely free plugin. I'll drop the link to this plugin in the video description. This plugin deserves a completely separate video, so I'm not going to talk about this plugin. So back to the topic. So all you have to do is just seize the first keyframe, and we need to leave this keyframe as linear in order to work the expression. After selecting all of these keyframes, select this icon. Kind of looks like an elastic. Yeah, they called it elastic. Click on this, and right away you'll notice there is an effect being applied which have these 3 properties which we can have the control over the shake. The amplitude decides how much value it's going to be with each shake. So if I increase it, you'll see that the value is also being increased. Let's undo that. And the frequency is going to determine the amount of wiggles per second, and the decay is going to determine how much longer the shake will be. So I'm going to put the amplitude into 190 because I want it to be a bit stronger. I'm also going to increase the frequency and the decay, and if I increase the decay, you can see that after around here it gets zeroed, because the more I increase, the shorter the shake will become. So let's leave it there and see how it's looking. Okay, I want it to be a bit more longer, so let's decrease the decay. Okay, I like that. And the good thing that we applied all of these effects to the adjustment layer, we can now duplicate this adjustment layer and put it right above the second footage. And I shouldn't have created this adjustment layer. Let's delete it. I'm going to duplicate it and put it right above the second footage. Now let's see. You might have to change the values, but let's see. Yeah, it's a bit too slow. So let's just increase the frequency. I think around 280 would be enough. I think I should play more with these values. There, I think that's perfect. Let's play it all together. Great. Now I'm going to make the eyes glow, and I'm going to do it inside of this comp. And before I'm going to do anything, I'm going to pre-compose this layer because there is these keyframes. I'm going to pre-compose by pressing Ctrl Shift C shortcut, and make sure to check this move all attributes and click OK. Now I want to separate the eyes first, so I'm going to duplicate this layer and let's call it eyes. I'm going to draw a mask around the eye. let's draw the mask for the second eye. So let's deselect it and then select it again so that we can draw a second mask. Okay, the masking part is finished. But if I move the playhead, you can see that there is movements to the eyes. Yeah, you can see where I am going with this. We need to track the mask. So let's bring up the mask property by pressing M. And before the tracking, I am going to increase the feather a bit. It's around 10. Okay, now I'm going to track this mask. First, the first eye. I'm going to select the mask and right click and drag mask. Okay, once again. Okay, the tracker is appeared. And you can do it with two ways. First, you can automate it by pressing this play icon, which will just track. Yeah, but the problem with this method is that there will be frames where the tracking is not accurate. Like, yeah, at this frame, the mask is out of place. Yeah, at this frame too. And that's why I prefer to do it frame by frame. And if you click this, let's track this part backwards. This way we can see is there any problem with the mask tracking. Tracking for the first eye is finished, and at this frame the eye is not visible. Both eye are not visible. So let's just trim it. And same for the last part. Yeah, this frame. You don't have to see that. Okay, now for the second eye. Let's go to the frame we draw the mask. Yeah, this frame. Let's select that mask and right click and drag mask. And I'm going to track it frame by frame. Okay, I think the tracking is finished. As I said, there is any problem with that, and I'm going to solve the eye layer. And this is the eyes. Now we can apply the glow effect. And I'm going to put the intensity to 0.8 and increase the radius to around 40. And I'm going to duplicate it and let lower the intensity to 0.5 and increase the radius to around 80. Okay, let's see. Not too bad. And if you want to change the color of the eye, you can apply the tint effect. Change this second color. Let's unsolid it and see. Yeah, and I prefer to not have any color. On to the second footage, I'm going to apply the exposure effect and create a keyframe on the exposure. Yes, we are going to animate the exposure. I'm going to increase the exposure at the start. Yeah, I think around 2 is fine. And in the middle, I'm going to lower the exposure to give a more emphasis on the eye. I think that's fine. And at the end, I'm going to increase the exposure again. Okay, that's fine. And let's see. I'm going to play with the graph because I want the exposure to be shorter at the start and end. Let's play it. Okay, not too bad. Same with the first footage. But this time I'm going to animate it in a flickery way. So create a keyframe on the exposure. Let's bring up the keyframes. At the start, I'm going to increase the exposure. Around at 50 frames, I'm going to lower it. And again increase it. Not like the first keyframe, but a bit. Again, I'm going to increase the exposure. Lower the exposure. Okay, that's fine. At the end, I'm going to increase the exposure. Let's see the keyframes. And let's play it all together. Yeah, we might need to take the values. There, I think that's looking good. Now we need some glitches, more specifically one frame glitches. But I'm going to copy the glitches I already made. I already created a tutorial specifically for this. It will appear in the screen right now. For the last thing, you can apply some grunge textures or particles on top of this, which might look good